In this video I'm going to explain to you that the Ferrari 360 is depreciating at a rate of $3,724 per year and why this doesn't tell the full story. What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. It is Saturday and that means it's time for a new depreciation analysis. And as you probably guessed, in today's analysis we are going to cover the Ferrari 360 and the analysis was requested by Rick Su. So Rick, I hope that you're watching. Now we will start this analysis by first taking a broad view and then we will drill down to the specific elements of the 360 market. Now that means that we will start with the market exploration and that we will move on then with the depreciation per year and the forecasted values. After that we will have a look then to the depreciation per 1,000 miles driven and we'll figure out what a fair purchasing price is for a 360. Now all the way at the end of the video we will reflect on all of the numbers which I'm going to show you and we will draw a conclusion for the market as a whole. We will start however now with the market exploration over here, where you can see that 3 histograms are popping up. The histogram at the top shows the full market and the 2 histograms below that show the split between roof type and transmission type. But let's first have a look to the full market. Now we know that in total around 4,200 360s were sold in the US. In today's market however, we can see that there are only 76 360s for sale. And given the amount of cars sold to the US, I was quite surprised by this low number. If we focus then on the prices, then we can see that the average price point, which is indicated by the dashed line going through the graph, is $88,630. Now the prices already start at $60,000 and stretch then up all the way till $145,000. If we move then 1 histogram down, then we can see the split between the roof type. Now originally there were a bit more spiders sold to the US than that there were coupes sold. And this difference we can also see in today's market, as there are 29 coupes for sale and 47 spiders. Now you can also see that the spiders are actually more expensive than the coupes. They namely have an average price point of $92,000, whereas the coupes have an average price point of $84,000. And I will show you a bit later why this is the case. Let's move on then to the last categorization, which is shown in the histogram at the bottom, and this histogram shows a split between transmission type. We can see that there are only 31 manual cars for sale versus 45 automatic cars. And this split is more or less in line with the original production numbers for the US. Reports namely say that there are about 1,139 manuals sold versus 3,061 automatic cars. Automatic cars namely have an average price point of $83,000 and manual cars have an average price point of $97,000. Now then, we finished up that market exploration, so that means that it's time to move on to the depreciation per year. And it happens to be so that that is exactly what is shown in the graph over here, where we have now model year on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. You can also see that there's a blue solid line going through the graph and this line shows the depreciation curve. Furthermore, you see that this line is surrounded by a blue shaded area and this shaded area shows the forecasted value range. But I will come back to that in a bit. Then finally, you can see that there are these black axes in the graph and these black axes show the average price point for that given model year. Now you already know that the average depreciation per year for 360 is around $3,724 per year. And I simply can't stress this enough, this is an average value. So for all of those people who like to comment on this value, please bear that in mind. Now in any case, I would of course first watch the full video, because there's a lot more to this depreciation number. If we namely inspect this graph a little bit closer, then we can see that the slope of the depreciation curve is not so steep at all. In fact, when I had a look to the correlation between year and price, then I saw that this was only 0.3. And for those of you who are not familiar with this number shows the extent to which model year and price linearly move in the same direction. Now the number can only be between -1 and 1. And if it would be either one of those, then it would mean that model year and price move very strongly together. And typically, the correlation between model year and price tends to vary between 0.5 and 0.8. Now this of course does then also mean that the value which we got for the 360, 0.3, is extremely low. In fact, out of all of the cars which I've analyzed, only the 996 Turbo had a lower correlation number. So then, nice talk of him with the correlation numbers, you might think. But why should I care? Well, a low correlation number means that the model year is not so important for the price of a car. And in this case, it means that the model year is not so important for the price of a 360. And this is then also exactly what is shown in the forecasted value range. So let's have a look to that. If we namely zoom in on this range, then we can see that there's a 75% chance that the average price point for a car with model year 1999 will lay between $70,000 and $88,500 1 year from now. Now the average price point for a car with model year 1999 is $78,400. So if we would compare this then to the forecasted value range, then we can see that there's an equal chance that the car will appreciate in value as it will depreciate in value. And overall, this just shows that the prices for the 360s will be quite stable in the foreseeable future. Now, if you have paid close attention to the graph, then you have seen that there's still something else going on which we need to talk about. It namely seems to be the case that there are two price levels going on in the market. You can see namely that around $100,000 there's a small gap in prices. Let's now dig a little bit deeper into the data and figure out what is happening here. And a bit of old-fashioned digging resulted in a graph over here, where we have now the depreciation curve, but then split by transmission type. You can see that we have in orange the manuals and in blue the automatic cars. And if I put this graph on the big screen, you can also see immediately what's going on in the market. You can see now that it is evident that the manual cars are responsible for the part of the market which is appreciating, while the automatic cars are responsible for the part which is still depreciating. And this is rather similar to the depreciation analysis of last week, where we've analyzed the 997 Turbo, link appearing above here. Now in monetary terms, this means that the average depreciation for our automatic cars is $5,125 per year, and that this is $4,154 per year for a manual car. You can see, however, that this doesn't go for all of the manual cars. Some of them in fact are even falling on the depreciation line for the automatic cars. And we will discuss why this is the case at the end of the video. Now before we move on then to the depreciation per 1000 miles driven, let's first have a look to the split between roof type. And that is shown in the graph over here, where we have in blue now the Spyders and in orange the Coupes. Of course, first of all, you can see that the Spyders are still a lot newer than the Coupes, and this is of course because they were introduced later. And second, we can see that the Spyders are still depreciating a lot more than the Coupes. And this is then also exactly because they are a bit newer. Now with that difference explained, it's time to move on to the depreciation per 1000 miles driven in the graph over here. We can see that we have now miles on the horizontal axis instead of model year, and still price on the vertical axis. Looking then to the depreciation per 1000 miles driven, we can see that on average a 360 loses $705 per 1000 miles. There are however two key things in this graph which you need to be aware of. Now also here we can see that the effect of miles on price is actually not so high. And when it comes to this depreciation number, we can say that the effect of miles on price is slightly higher than the effect of model year on price, but that the overall effect is still very small. And let me show you why. First of all, we can see that there's an extremely strong bottoming pattern. And what do we like? Exactly, nice bottoming patterns. I mean, just look at that depreciation curve. It seems to be the case that after 30,000 miles, the cars are almost not depreciating anymore if you add any mileage. And the second point then, even though a car can have a high mileage, it can still be priced significantly higher than the market average. Look for example to the cars over here and over here. This is something, by the way, which you rarely see in other markets. Now to make sure that we cover all of the aspects of the market, I also had a look to the depreciation per 1000 miles driven, but then split by transmission type and roof type. As you can see, however, the slope of the curves are in both cases almost exactly the same. The only difference is that the curves are a little bit shifted along the y-axis. You can, however, see something interesting in the graph which shows a split by transmission type, so I will put that on the big screen. Now you can see that most of the cars which fall in the higher price segment, so above $100,000, are all manual cars with a relatively low mileage. And there are only two exceptions to this, the automatic cars over here and the manual cars with the high mileage over here. So then, we have now a good idea of how the market looks like and which factors are influencing the different market categorizations in terms of depreciation. But what is the combined effect of model year and mileage, and what is then a fair purchasing price for each miles and model year combination? That is of course what you as a potential buyer would be interested in, so let's have a look to that. And that of course means that we need to consider the model year, the price and the mileage all together. And now stay with me here, because I inputted all of these factors to a machine learning algorithm which shows the extent to which a car is following the normal market dynamics. And the idea behind this is of course that if a car is following the normal market dynamics, it is most likely priced fairly. The other way around it of course also works, and so that if a car doesn't follow the normal market dynamics, it's mostly priced over the market or under the market. And the result of that analysis you can see in the 3D plot over here, where you can see that we indeed have now model year, price and the mileage. You can also see that the cars are now colored, and the darker the color, the more likely it is that that specific car is following the normal market dynamics. Now before diving into the details, let's first just have a look to the graph. We can see now that our earlier conclusions that both model year and mileage have a very low effect on the price of a car are now confirmed. We can see namely that the cars are organized basically in one big cloud and that there isn't any direction in the cloud. If you, for example, move alongside the model year or the mileage axis, then you can see that the price is only changing with very small increments. Also, we can see that some cars are priced clearly out of the market. These are, for example, the cars which the machine learning algorithm gave a white color, such as the ones over here. We can then also see immediately why they are priced out of the market according to the algorithm. The price-mileage combination doesn't match with the rest of the market, as the price is way too high given the mileage of the cars. And in fact, two of these bubbles are the two manual cars which we identified previously as the ones which were priced over $100,000, but which had an extremely high mileage. If we have a look then to the cars which are actually priced fairly according to the algorithm, then we can see that there are quite many cars which have a dark color. Within this cloud of dark green bubbles, we can however distinguish two categories. The first category contains cars which are priced over $100,000 and cars which have less than 20,000 miles. And as we saw previously, these are mostly the manual cars. The second category of cars are the cars which are priced under $100,000 and which have less than 40,000 miles driven. And this category mostly contains automatic cars, high and low mileage, and high mileage manual cars. Now, in practice, this means then that you need to decide first of all which car you want, and then, based on what you selected, what price range belongs to this car. And by now, you know of course that if you want a manual car with low mileage, you need to pay up. Now, if you don't want a low mileage manual car, then we've just seen that you need to find a car which is priced under $100,000 and has less than 40,000 miles driven. Now, practically, this means then depending on the car you want, you need to select the appropriate price and mileage range. And within that range, you need to do a relative value analysis where you will consider the price, the mileage and the model year. And this of course all with the aim to find the best combination of those three. You are now up to date on the latest numbers of the Ferrari 360 market. But what are we going to make of all of these numbers? Let's conclude. First of all, we saw that model year is of almost no importance for the price of a car and that mileage is only of little importance. And this of course is completely different than for some other car markets like the Audi R8 V10. In fact, in terms of dynamics, I would say that the 360 market shows more resemblance to the 997 Turbo. Also for the 360, we saw namely that the market for the automatic and manual cars are completely different. And that especially the prices for the low mileage manual cars are significantly higher than the market average. And perhaps this even has something to do with the few manuals sold back in the days. Overall, however, I think it is quite fair to say that if you purchase a Ferrari 360, you can expect very little to no depreciation. You might even see some appreciation. Especially for the older model years, we've seen that the values are extremely stable and also that the car is not dropping in price so hard anymore if you add some mileage. Now overall, I think it is quite fair to say that if you purchase a Ferrari 360, you can expect very little to no depreciation. Especially for the older model years, the values seem to be extremely stable. On top of that, we've seen that the depreciation curve for the depreciation per 1000 miles driven is showing quite a strong bottoming pattern. So also in terms of mileage, you're quite on the safe side then. Personally, I would then also be looking towards an older model year with around 20 to 30,000 miles driven. And that is of course if you actually want to use the car. Because we also saw that the prime examples, and especially the manual with low miles, are priced significantly higher than the market average. And that of course means that the chance of depreciation is a lot higher if you start to add mileage for those cars. And with that conclusion, we arrive at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed the video, please support the channel by smashing that like button. Also make sure then to subscribe so you get notified when a depreciation analysis for your favorite car goes live. And you can by the way request this analysis by commenting down below. In the meantime, you can check out the depreciation analysis for the Audi R8 over here and the one for the Corvette C7 over here. As always, thank you for watching and see you at the next analysis.